making America great again.
This is our vision. This is our mission. But we can only get there together.
President Donald Trump delivers an optimistic message to Congress. Sean Spicer.
The vision and agenda he articulated last night is who he is. It's what's in his heart.
My conversation with the White House press secretary about the president's big speech. Ash Wednesday. Pope Francis celebrates Mass as the Lenten season begins. On EWTN News Nightly on this Ash Wednesday, March 1st, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump earns praise for his first speech before a joint session of Congress. A majority of Americans liked his optimistic view of the future and calls for bipartisan support.
Seize this moment, believe in yourselves, believe in your future, and believe once more in America.
President Donald Trump striking a softer and more unifying tone during his first address to Congress. He started his speech condemning the recent targeting of Jewish community centers and the killing of an Indian man in Kansas.
We are a country that stands united in condemning hate and evil in all of its very ugly forms.
And he showed support for certain elements of Obamacare, including protections for patients with pre-existing conditions. He backed NATO, which he has criticized in the past. But by far the most emotional moment of the night came when the president paid tribute to Karen Owens, the widow of Navy SEAL Ryan Owens, who was killed during a raid in Yemen in the first days of the president's administration.
Ryan died as he lived, a warrior and a hero, battling against terrorism and securing our nation.
A CNN ORC poll of speech watchers shows 57% viewed the speech as very positive. President Trump draws attention to violence committed by immigrants, announcing the creation of a national office to help American victims. The president says it will provide a voice for people ignored by the media and silenced by special interests. Wyatt Goolsbee has been delving into the thorny immigration issue and what the president's plans could be. Good evening, Wyatt.
Lauren, hours before his speech, the president appeared to soften his stance on immigration, saying he's open to a reform bill. But in his speech, the president outlined why he wants America to switch from a system of lower-skilled immigration and instead adopt a merit-based system.
Adopting a merit-based system, we will have so many more benefits. It will save countless dollars, raise workers' wages, and help struggling families.
The president vowed that, quote, positive immigration reform is possible as long as the country keeps three goals in mind.
To improve jobs and wages for Americans, to strengthen our nation's security, and to restore respect for our laws.
Democrats listened intently, but they didn't like what they heard about building a wall along the border.
The wall is a 14th century solution to a 21st century problem that we have. We don't want to have chaos at the border, but how do you secure the border?
Bill Canny is the U.S. Bishop's point person on refugees. He warns against targeting illegal immigrants who have no criminal background.
We cannot let those people live in fear.
Canny says church teaching calls for a balance. We have the right to protect the country and secure our borders, but we must also show compassion to immigrants.
We have to recognize that we have brothers and sisters in other countries who need to flee violence, who need to flee drastic poverty, who can't send their kids to school.
Canny says the president's openness to an immigration reform bill was encouraging. Now he wants specifics. The U.S. Bishops' Conference also wants more information about the president's new executive order on immigration, which he has yet to unveil. Specifically, they want to know how many total refugees he will allow into the country, which helps them to plan for the months and the year ahead. Lauren?
Wyatt, the president's last executive order on immigration is on hold in court. Do we know how this new order will be different from the last one?
Yes, we know sources say that the president may remove Iraq from the list of 7 countries on the original travel ban. One other note, he may possibly no longer single out Syrian refugees specifically for an indefinite ban. Lauren?
Wyatt. Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the White House. Wyatt. President Trump's first speech to Congress leaves Republicans encouraged and enthusiastic. There's still some thorny divisions on health care, taxes, and even more than that. Jason Calvi has been talking to lawmakers at the Capitol. Jason.
Lauren, Speaker Paul Ryan calls the speech a home run. In it, President Trump asked Democrats and Republicans to work together to stop what he called the imploding Obamacare disaster. But Republicans aren't even on the same page about what should replace it. President Trump jumps into the debate among Republicans about how to repeal and replace Obamacare.
We should help Americans purchase their own coverage through the use of tax credits and expanded health savings accounts.
Earlier this week, conservative Republicans slammed tax credits, calling them entitlements. But last night, the GOP was looking for the president to bring the party together.
We're a consensus government. People have come with different ideas. At the end of the day, we're going to have to blend it. And, as Ronald Reagan said, I'll take 80% of a loaf.
The president's promise to undo Obamacare resonates with Republicans.
It affects not only people's health care, but it affects their individual liberty, religious freedom. It's a huge mess. I think he's right when he says it's a big disaster. So that means it won't be easy to fix.
Democrats aren't feeling the call for unity.
Speeches have a shelf life, they go away. It's his actions. His actions have favored the hard right.
That comes from a senator who rallied at the Capitol today with Planned Parenthood.
It will not stand. Do you hear that, President Trump?
He's also put the brakes on confirming the president's cabinet. Many in the GOP say the president's speech didn't bring them closer on a plan to replace Obamacare. House leaders say they hope to pass their bill by mid-April. Senate Republicans also met behind closed doors today to hash out their health care plan. Lauren?
Jason, you told us ahead of the speech that conservative Republicans were worried about tax credits in the draft Obamacare repeal. Now that the president is backing the credits, are conservatives getting on board?
It's still unclear. The House Freedom Caucus released a statement praising the president's promise to repeal Obamacare, but it didn't mention tax credits.
Jason Calvi, Capitol Hill reporter, thank you so much. Joining me now is Sean Spicer, White House press secretary. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, especially on it's become an annual event.
It has
for us
with
to
us,
gather
with
on
our
Ash
ashes. Yes, that's
right.
right. And you came to our chapel. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for having Mass. It was very convenient.
Isn't it? Isn't it? I love having it at
Right.
work. Last night's speech, great reviews from everybody, even people who do not like Donald Trump. Even critics have said the tone was perfect, the time for small thinking is over. And I think what they're asking now is, are we going to see a different President Trump now?
Well, I think the vice president addressed this on the various shows this morning. He was asked a similar question. And he made it clear that I think for those people who have known or gotten to know President Trump when he was candidate Trump or President-elect Trump, know that this is who he's always been. I think sometimes he speaks to different audiences in different ways, but the vision and agenda he articulated last night is who he is. It's what's in his heart. And so, I know we've talked about it a little before, but this is presumption that, gosh, well, how did this happen? This is who he is.
How did he all of a sudden become
right.
good?
No, but he's always
right,
been
that's
this way.
what
He's
other
always
people
been,
are saying.
Right, and he's always had that desire to make the country and our people better. The reason that, he ran for president is because he feels blessed by this country and the success that he's had. And I think the desire that he has to share his success with others and to give them the opportunities that maybe he had, or the opportunity to pursue their dreams, not necessarily his dreams, but their dreams. What do they want to do? Is this an America that gives people the benefit to get an education or a healthcare system that allows them to pursue their dreams?
Yesterday at lunch, and thank you very much for inviting me to lunch with the president.
Well, and again, I think just for your viewers to know, I think it's important that when we talk about broadcasters and the press, that EWTN, CBN, there are stations and outlets beyond the big five, as they call them, and I think they're important voices. And I mentioned to you yesterday after the lunch that it's getting, not just incorporating you and other other voices in these lunches and gatherings, but it's having other people hear about issues that are important, because when these other reporters hear voices and issues, and that's really at the issues that so many people who watch this station and others that have a strong degree of faith, that have concerns because of their faith, or issues that are driven by their faith, that they should know and they should hear that just because they're not among the mainstream media voices talking about their agenda, that there are voices and concerns that people of faith have.
What you said yesterday is it's almost an echo chamber. I asked a question to the president about religious liberty. He answered it. I heard someone following up later about religious liberty.
And so it's infectious. It's not just having more voices in the room, it's what that does to the other ones, because you're right. It's then getting somebody who from the mainstream media, or maybe, and again, I'm not trying to indict them here, but it's getting them to hear, wow, I never even thought of that issue.
They would not have thought about religious freedom.
They would not have thought about it, and that having the issue brought up gets them to think about an issue or a concern that they might not have asked before or thought of. And I think it helps broaden the list of concerns and the amount of issues that come up.
Sure, because if everybody is talking about abortion and people aren't talking about the culture of life or adoption, that becomes what everybody
That's exactly
talks
right.
about.
And again, I think those are great issues. Or the way in which you say, I'm a proud pro-life person. When you listen to the folks on the mainstream media, they talk about, anti-choice. I'm not against anything.
Right.
I'm proudly for something. And I think that's a vastly different way at which you look at something, that people talk about half full or half empty. And I think that when you promote life, it's not just being against something, but it's being very proudly for something.
When I asked him that question, he said yes, it would be addressed in the speech. And at the beginning of the speech, very top of the speech, there were lines that he talked about faith.
Right. And he talked about that, the line was so powerful. He talked about the fact that in this country, we can disagree on policies, but that when you talk about the recent threats that especially have affected people of the Jewish faith, the attacks and threats called in on Jewish communities.
And the toppling of cemeteries.
At the cemeteries.
It's horrible.
That this is something that we should all unite behind, a principle that we should be able to be free in practicing our faith. We should embrace the different faiths and beliefs in God that we have, and we should defend that right, and we should stand against any hate or evil that prevents someone from freely practicing that faith.
Thank you, Sean Spicer, for joining us, and we will continue the conversation. So tomorrow on EWTN News Nightly, we will talk to you about how you balance faith life with work and family. Pope Francis celebrates Mass today for Ash Wednesday at the Roman Basilica of Santa Sabina. It's a tradition going back to the early days of the Church. Our Vatican correspondent Mary Shovlin reports from Rome.
Pope Francis began the Lenten season by celebrating Mass at the ancient Roman Basilica of Santa Sabina, which dates back to the 5th century and is run today by the Dominican order. It started with a procession from the Benedictine Basilica of Sant'Anselmo just down the street. The friars chanted the Litany of the Saints as hundreds gathered outside to greet Pope Francis. A small crowd of religious and lay people attended.
Quaresima è il tempo della compassione per dire con il salmista.
Francis is encouraging the faithful to return to God. He says Lent is a path that leads us to victory over everything that reduces us to something unworthy of our dignity as God's children. In his homily, Pope Francis also emphasized that we are dust, yes, but dust in God's loving hands who breathes life into us. Lent is a time to say no, he said, to anything that would smother the breath of life given to us by God. And the Holy Father encouraged Catholics to set aside everything that isolates us so that our dust can be transformed into dust of love. In Rome, Mary Shovlin, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, reaction from Congress.
He set a presidential tone. Even the Washington Post had to agree that he spoke as a president.
Catholic Representative Francis Rooney of Florida tells me what the president got right in last night's address. President Trump received a warm welcome by a Republican Congress last night, including one Catholic congressman who served as U.S. ambassador to the Holy See. Joining us now is Congressman Francis Rooney of Florida. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me back on.
The president is getting thumbs up from people on the left, on the right today for his speech last night. What did the president get right in your view?
Well, I think he got several things right. First of all, he set a presidential tone. Even the Washington Post had to agree that he spoke as a president, showing capability to lead our country and unite Americans and not as a campaigner. That's kind of a real cardinal change. Second, I was really glad to see him speak about immigration in terms broader than just a security issue and talk about some of the fundamental sociological issues, or allude to some of the sociological issues that we're going to have to confront after we secure the border. And then the third thing that really brought joy to my heart was the discussion of choice and parochial schools.
Right. Back to immigration, he also said yesterday at the White House in a meeting that I had attended that he thinks the time is right for an immigration bill as long as there is compromise. What is your thought on that?
Well, I've said all along that the American people are just and compassionate and embracing of all societies. That's why we have the melting pot that we have. And no one has ever said we're going to change our fundamental American ethic. We just have to secure the border and understand who's coming in our country, where they are, and what they may be doing here. And if we would have comprehensive immigration reform after we secure the border, we'll be able to have people in here on some kind of legitimized status where they sign up, and we know where they are and who they're working for, et cetera.
Let's move on to health care and the importance of a new health care plan to replace Obamacare. There's infighting among Republicans about exactly how to do that. Do you think that conservative Republicans can get on board together?
Well, I'm optimistic that they will. There is a segment of the coalition that would rather not repeal and wait and repeal and replace at the same time. I think the Speaker and the leadership team made some good arguments to use the reconciliation process now and then phase in a more market-based competitive alternative, which breaks down the rest of the mandates and does the things that Dr. Price can't do administratively and that they can't do through reconciliation.
He mentioned school choice, as you said. He didn't mention pro-life issues or religious liberty. And as a Catholic, are you satisfied with what you heard in the president's speech last night?
It would have been nice to hear a blow for religious liberty around the world when we have so many Christians that are being persecuted, so many Christians that can't get into the UN refugee camps and become processed as refugees, and so many authoritarian governments that are repressive. I would like to hear a little more on the broader issues of foreign policy than we did.
Okay, and do you believe that coming up and heading to this school choice town hall, I think as he's billing it in Florida, is going to be something that can help sway the minds of people who are not solidly behind school choice?
Well, I think we just have to keep driving the truck down the road as fast as we can. We have this great opportunity. I had the chance to visit with Mrs. DeVos last night, and I said, thank you. Thank you for being here, for serving, and for the choice that you're going to bring and the competition you're going to bring to our education system and return it to the parents and children.
Representative Francis Rooney, Republican of Florida, it is always lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and have a nice day.
Up next, our political roundtable, Mary-Kate Carey and Bob Cusack react to the president's address. President Trump struck a different tone in his speech last night, a little softer, a little more optimistic. Joining us now is Mary-Kate Carey, former White House speechwriter, and Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief for The Hill. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Lauren.
Nice to see you.
Thanks
for coming. Mary-Kate, you wrote an article advising the president that the key to a successful speech is to keep it short, humble, and stick to the script. How do you do?
Actually, 2 out of 3.
Okay. Okay.
My dream, George Washington's joint session address was 10 minutes long.
Oh, there you go.
I realized,
I see where you are now.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
But
well,
Bill
he didn't
Clinton,
have all that applause either.
That's true. That's true. Bill Clinton was the other extreme, an hour and a half. This was 45 minutes written, an hour delivered, which I think is just fine for your first one. And then as far as humility was concerned, I was looking for some self-deprecating humor, didn't get it. But he did keep the what we would call the Lenny Skutnik moment.
What's that?
The people up in the gallery, the American heroes who are honored. And that is a humble thing to do, to turn the spotlight on someone else. So I'm glad he kept that tradition. As a disruptor, I wasn't sure he was going to.
Right.
And then the third was to stick to the script. And I certainly did not expect him to not ad-lib at all. And I was shocked. He really stuck to the script. It was a great script. Positive, optimistic, forward-looking.
And it had some faith elements too. He opened it up by talking about the Jewish cemeteries and
Yes.
what a terrible thing that is. Bob, you tweeted last night, there will be GOP clashes on the Hill.
Mm-hmm.
You have also written a really great article in the Hill about March being the biggest month for the GOP in the decade.
Yeah,
in the last decade.
Yeah, because it's been a decade since Republicans had both the House, the Senate, as well as the White House. So this is the month they have to make some major progress on tax reform, especially on Obamacare, repealing and replacing. And they haven't made a lot of progress yet. So the speech, I thought, was very effective. Democrats kind of being on the defensive and talking about it over the last 12 or so hours. And they needed some momentum. They got it. But can they actually make progress on legislation? We shall see.
Mary Kate, you, as a Catholic, I'm sure had your ear attuned to this. He didn't spend a lot of time on religious liberty. He didn't touch on it. And he didn't talk about life issues. But he did talk about school choice. Did you expect more?
I was disappointed. I think most Catholics probably would be. But I also think the tone of the speech was a very empathetic tone. And I think that's what caught people's ear and what sounded different coming from him. My favorite line in the speech was, we are one people with one destiny. We will only get there together, and we are made by the same God. And to me, that is a very deeply religious thought, and not your standard sort of quote from the Bible or something that you would hear that's sort of boilerplate. That took a lot of thought to say, and he delivered it beautifully. And that sort of made up for the lack of other religious policies. But the tone of it was deeply faithful, I thought.
Well, one of the things when I was at the White House yesterday, we were talking about faith and talking about the media and the faith media having a seat at the table, which is unprecedented. So, Bob, is this good? Your mainstream media, I would say The Hill is pretty mainstream. Do you feel like the inclusion of religious media, minority, is good?
I think it's good because it shakes things up a little bit. And I think the way prior White Houses have done it, well, okay, they did it that way. And it's totally Trump's decision of this White House now, if you're going to have public press conferences or gaggles, they should allow everybody in.
With you.
But if you're going to have private conversations, which the Obama White House had, you can invite whoever you want.
Although I do have to tell you, I asked Sean Spicer about that, and the pool was there, which was something that I was not aware of. So I think that it's really important for that message to get out. Okay, Mary Kate Carey, would love to have you back, former speechwriter, and Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief for The Hill. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll leave you tonight with a look at the Pope's procession in Rome before he celebrated Mass for Ash Wednesday. Good night, and God bless.